Me too! Yes! Someone has said, you're not a slave to motherhood.
That's right.
And so I think the takeaway is like, you have these lives before you, these tiny people who are literally people developing, but like you have you.
Just like I feed myself and I make sure I am clean and I've got a place to sleep and I wear clothes. I feel like it's an integral part of my wellness.
As Black women, we have been bound by ideas told to us, ideas that were strong suggestion that were not to be veered away from, ideas that stifle our creativity and limit us to boxes. These ideas mold us into the societal view of perfection for who or what we should be. We have been told in not so many words that our bodies are not our own, and so we treat them as such. Well, it's time for us to reconnect to ourselves. Join me as I gather with friends and professionals to talk about the many facets of Black pleasure. This is part of our healing and the discovery and exploration of who we are and who we desire to be. There is liberation in pleasure. Let's journey on this pathway together. Hello, and welcome back to another Black Pleasure Is series. I'm Ayanna Davison. I'm founder of the Vagina Chronicles, also a certified nurse midwife, and I'm happy to bring along two very special guests. Today we are talking about Black pleasure on the parenthood realm, pleasure as a parent, which is a big deal that we don't often talk about, and I think we need to talk about. So without further ado, I'd like my guests to introduce themselves, and then we'll start a discussion. So,
hello, I am Ayanna Binta. You to say who I am?
yes.
I am a doula, educator, and fitness instructor.
Yeah.
And I am Deidre Coutsoumpos. I am also a doula and a childbirth educator, a doula trainer. I call myself a systemic advocate, just here to further the work and bring more information around Black maternal wellness.
Lovely. Thank you all for joining me for this discussion.
Yeah.
So we talk a little bit in the beginning. I like to kind of like go over what is pleasure to you? What does that mean to you when you just hear that? And then sexual pleasure, especially relating to being a Black woman. Anyone can take this up.
Yeah, pleasure, I mean, to me, it's just linked with joy. Like anything that brings me joy, that's pleasure, right? Sexual pleasure. Let me think on that. Go, hold on. I'm gonna come back to me. Like I'm like, that's a deep dive.
It can
From the beginning.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I really like what you said. It is. I mean, and one can experience pleasure in all sorts of realms, right? Just in from moment to moment, taking a breath, hanging out with our kids. When it comes to sexual pleasure, I feel like it's something that has been taboo, at least in my personal life growing up, and being able to even uncover that has been quite the journey for me. And they're like, oh, I'm just here at the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more I want to know, especially listening to some of your other conversations. Okay, but sexual pleasure, I am finding it that it's more and more integral to how I need to take care of myself to be healthy in a more holistic way. Just like I feed myself and I make sure I am clean and I've got a place to sleep and I wear clothes. I feel like that's another area of my life that I am beginning to create more space to be more attentive and intentional to make sure I'm meeting those needs as well. Yeah. So I feel like it's an integral part of my wellness. I'm not sure if that's exactly the answer to your question, but it's just one of the things that I'm feeling now I'm having to be a lot more intentional about because life is crazy and busy, and then somebody's needs have got to get met, and I'm going to have to make my own needs, whatever that looks like for me now. So.
And I agree, like when I do not prioritize my sexual pleasure, like I'm not well. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like I actually like prioritizing my sexual pleasure makes it brings that joy. Like you said, all the other things that I do to that are part of my wellness routine, that are part sexual pleasure is a big part. I'm a Scorpio.
Me too! Yes!
That's why we are here. We'll just talk about sexual pleasure.
We're fine. What's your birthday?
November 14th.
Okay.
November 12th.
Okay.
And I'm October 30th. So we're, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yes. I mean,
No wonder.
sexual pleasure is such a big part of my life. I say that all the time.
Right.
Like, sex is, I need sex. Like, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you know,
Yeah.
human nature, we all, you know, need sex in some way.
We
but
do.
I say that all the time.
Yeah.
So it is a part of, like, my wellness.
I think we kind of briefly mentioned it before on the hierarchy of needs. We think about like safety and food and nourishment and clothing and all that, you know, feeling, you know, secure in whatever we're doing. But like that sexual pleasure part too is just as important. And then when it's off the table, it kind of, we see ourselves suffer or, you know, in certain types of ways. So I'm glad that you all said this because it's the truth. It's the truth. And opening these conversations so that other folks can maybe have that aha moment for themselves, and then maybe share that with their friends or even family so that you're opening up things in a way that you hadn't been looking at them before, you know? So, so why we're kind of here is like, y'all are parents. Y'all have children. And what I see many times is like the sacrifices that parents make. There's a lot, you know. I grew up with in a, how do we say, a 2-parent home for a little while, and then it became a 1-parent home. And I saw firsthand for myself how much sacrifice my mom made for me. So I, you know, that kind of thing sticks in my head. But then also seeing people in the office where they've had a newborn, and we come to our end of postpartum visits, and it's like, so we're talking about intimacy, and it's like some people it was not even on their mind. Some people's like, some folks, if we're talking end, maybe 6-week visit, we'll call it that. They were like, well, we've already jumped into that, you know, that territory. And then other people are like, I would like to, but I'm scared. I don't have time. I feel like I'm being touched all the time, and that's not a sensation that I don't even want to be touched by my partner. I'm breastfeeding. That's a whole category by itself, you know? And I feel like, you know, I can barely meet the basic needs for myself. So, like, that hasn't even entered in. So, I guess I'll read off the card here. How did you find opportunities for pleasure? Or can you think back to the time when you first had your babies and, like, where your mind was at with pleasure? Take your time.
My babies are still pretty young.
Yes.
Like, my daughter's 3. My son's just turned 1. So, like, 3 years ago, like 3.5 years ago is when I had her. And I actually, struggled a lot with my partner. Not necessarily with my own, but, like, really wanting him to be the one to pleasure me. He was like the opposite. You always hear of men like wanting to have sex and the women not wanting to have sex.
Right.
It was opposite for
Really?
us. Like, as soon as I became pregnant, he actually like was very like, I don't really want to have sex with her.
Yeah.
And it was like very apparent like in the beginning, and then it went down like basically like no sex.
Really, during your pregnancy?
During my pregnancy.
Okay.
And like I said, I was quite the opposite. Yeah. So like, for me, it was like, how do I get him to understand that this is something, you know, that I need? Or how do I not depend on him totally to be the one, you know, to do that for me?
Right.
I was pregnant and masturbating.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't getting and I was like, I'm talking about like,
high level
what?
need. Yeah.
Libido was on high.
Yeah.
And he was not, like, he was avoiding it at all. Like, it was so evident that he was avoiding.
Yeah.
Like, and yeah, it was really a question for me, like, you know, it took me a long time to navigate my way back to sexual pleasure after my daughter, basically.
Yeah.
But that journey started in pregnancy and lingered on until she was about, you know, maybe like 2, where our sex lives were like, not there.
Not like non-existent.
Yeah.
I do want to say to folks who might be watching that a couple things. So like letting people know that this is like okay. So first of all, your libido does change in pregnancy. Yeah. So like let's be very real. That is oftentimes how people get pregnant in the first place is that they have sex. There are other modalities, there are other ways, right? That we have a lot of reproductive assistance, but like oftentimes folks are getting pregnant because they had sex. Okay, so we're gonna start there. Penetrative sex, many times. And so during the course of pregnancy, we have a surge in hormones that helps to keep people pregnant, and that surge is individualized, but that can cause the response of like high sex drive, high libido, and so that is completely in the expectations. And then also like there's nothing wrong with masturbation while you're pregnant. As a matter of fact, we kind of encourage it, especially towards the end, because that allows for some of that oxytocin to flow. Also, and again, I was going to say, and that love to flow through your body, but that's oxytocin too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then that helps to promote, like, especially towards the end, hopefully your labor helps to facilitate that. So, like, these are quite, I hate the word normal, but these are anticipated, expected things. Yeah. And then secondly, I do see quite a few partners who shy away, or I get the question either from the partner or the birther who's in the office, like, can you please tell him it's okay for us to have sex? Yeah. Or like, is it okay for us to have sex? And I will say with the caution here, talk to your trusted provider, because every pregnancy is different. Sometimes there's a high risk condition, but just so that you know, like, yes, like partners do struggle with this during pregnancy, and then we hop into postpartum, which we don't talk about, and it's like a whole whirlwind of things. So like you're definitely not alone. Yeah. I've talked to, and I hope you don't feel that way anyway, but like I've talked to plenty of people who are like, is there something wrong? And it's like, no, do what you gotta do. Exactly. So just to put that plug in there. But Deidre, I don't know if you like what your first thoughts like, when you think back to your kids are a little bit older. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like your first,
So for my first experience, you were talking about that pre-pregnancy thing. And for me, pre-pregnancy, my partner and I waited till we got married, and we came up in a conservative Christian environment. We're like, okay, we're just going to do all the things together. But I still wasn't very comfortable with my body until I got pregnant with my oldest. And there's something about that felt like a cork had popped, or like it sprung open. I'm like, ooh, I'm here. Look at this. What is happening? What? Yeah. I was feeling myself. Walk in it. Yes. And so we waited because I had a major repair after she was born. And so that took time because I had to know my body in another way, and I kind of feel comfortable what was going on with this new postpartum body. Yeah. And so it took us a while to, but we were all patient, and we were tired, but we were patient to experience penetrative sex. Mm-hmm. But then the bigger question became like, what else? What is actually sex, right? Mm-hmm. Sex is not just intercourse. Sex is all these other things. And I think that we both had different understandings of that. Mm-hmm. We had what it was before we had baby, and now what does it mean now? And I felt like I really, especially postpartum, and I now think back probably with each of my kids, I just desired being like physically close and not necessarily always sexually intimate, but like have this physical intimacy because yes, we have all these little people sucking on you and climbing on you and touching on you, but can I just be held? And like, I just want to be still. And like, it feels so good to just have somebody embrace me and be with me. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that is enough to turn into something else, right? But we were doing all of the discoveries, not just becoming new parents, but what does it mean to be like now this whole adult human, and how do we relate? And that was a big struggle. Yeah.
Because like that impacts, if you have a third or fourth degree tear, which are pretty significant perineal tears, and the perineum is that area like right below the vaginal opening. Everyone has a perineum, but like that area from like right below either the vulvar tissue down towards the anus, or if you're someone who has a penis, from that like area from the testicles and below, we'll just kind of generalize it. That's that area, but usually some of the tears in childbirth will happen that way. That can impact not only sexual function, but like your bowel movements, how you pee, like how you walk, how you carry yourself. And then additionally, if you had a C-section scar too, like that can impact what you're doing, how you move. And so these things impact like how we move through pleasure or just our everyday life, but then additionally pleasure. The first week after having your baby, did you even think about that? Like, was sex even in your head? Or, like, intimacy? It was? Okay. And then, like, no shade. There's, like, no right or wrong answer. It's like, I'm just curious, you know?
I actually thought about sex a lot. Yeah, and I think because I was missing it so much during my pregnancy that after, and it was, like, truly immediate, like you said, like a week. Because after maybe, like, 2 months, is I had a huge drop in my libido. And and that's, of course, when my partner was ready to...
You're like, oh, but now I don't want to.
He had candles lit and everything. And I'm like, he's kissing. And I'm like, I just want to go back upstairs because I have anxiety. And I just want to be with my baby. Yeah. And it was, and I couldn't... I started experiencing, anxiety a lot. And so, like, then that's when, like, sex was, like, I was not thinking about sex from, like, months to I don't know when. But, like, a week, like, to, like, definitely, like, a month, I would be like, let this body heal up. Maybe now that I dropped this baby, maybe now that I've had my baby, that, like, he'll be more interested again.
Yeah, Do you think you were in that zone the first week at all? No. Okay.
It was very
and I like that to show like the contrast because like again this is all individualized,
Exactly.
So yeah.
No, I feel like what happened for me, and looking back retrospectively, and I did not know this for a while, but I experienced depression during the latter part of my pregnancy and probably from the time the baby was born onward until maybe 18 or 20 months after the baby was born. So I was already starting to reel, and then you have to take care of this human. You're like, I will just take care of you till your parents come home. So I think that had a major part to play that I didn't understand in that moment. So I was just trying to find my bearings.
Yeah. My goodness, I can only imagine that you bring up another great issue. Postpartum depression and mood disorders, like those impact us. After the placenta, I like to throw in the clinical portion. After the placenta comes out, like we have a major shift in hormones because there's nothing that really requires us to keep the pregnancy because the baby's out. And so, and I just thought about one more thing. So now we're talking about, for some people that hits really hard, and depression, anxiety, the blues, which is what we consider to be what we expect, which is this kind of roller coaster of emotions can happen. And like, can you imagine being in a place where like, you're not really feeling like yourself, and then like having a partner who may want these things. And so thank you for sharing that part too, because it's like that's so critical to like how we move. There's so many different aspects of postpartum, which is why I really, really want people to prepare for it as much as they can, because there's things that come out of left field that you're like, but I didn't know this was going to happen, So moving to like the second child, and that's where you are now, a year. Do you remember, was this pregnancy for you different? What about, were differences there in terms of libido, drive, fulfilling sexual pleasure? I know there might be other components too if like partners aren't on the same page. And I don't know background, but just throwing that out there. And then walking into pleasure in the postpartum time frame after the second child, did you tackle it differently?
Definitely. I think my expectations changed really. Like I was like almost like waiting for him not to want to have sex as soon as I got pregnant. But he did.
Okay.
And there was still, as I got, more pregnant as, weeks went on, there was a resistance, slowed down, but he never like stopped, like with the first pregnancy. Yeah. And in true Scorpio fashion, my libido was, up there the entire pregnancy. Great. So like, I never, I never not wanted to have sex while I was pregnant. Okay. But in the postpartum place, Trying to think immediately after. I felt, you know what? It was different because I was just so busy. I had a 2.5-year-old. And so, like, how I would, like, thinking about it with my, like, after I had my daughter, with my first, I didn't really, like, think about, it was like, all right, got it. Like, it was just like, I have to do all these things because I have this 2.5-year-old who still needs me, who still wants her mommy, and I have this baby now, and, like, I'm just going to get everything done. And I was super hyper-focused when we talk about that postpartum mood disorders, like, on not, like, going back that way. So I was like, all right, now I got to, like, make sure I'm well. And so, like, my mind was just on, like, I just got to make sure I stay good, right? And somehow, like, even though I'm always talking about how, like, pleasure, sexual pleasure is such a big part of my, like, wellness, I let it, like, slip through the cracks. It was like, that was not, like, it was like, I just got to do all the things, take care of the kids, and, like, make sure I shower every day. But it was like, I didn't.
That wasn't like,
it was not at the forefront of my mind anymore. Like, it started to, like, drift.
I think priorities change, right? Yeah.
So I want to ask a question. Like, how did you reclaim that? Like, how did you come back to that?
I am still reclaiming.
Okay. That was the next question. I was like, where are you all now? But like, got it. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. For the second time, I mean, I feel like it's very much focused on my biggest focus was, how do I take care of 2 kids? What does this mean? Absolutely. And my oldest is a little bit further apart than your kids are. They're 4 years apart. Yeah, they're 4 years apart. So my oldest could do stuff for herself, and I just kind of felt like, okay, this baby, what do I do with this baby again? But during the pregnancy, I do remember having a higher sex drive, definitely a lot more than my first time, and then my partner was also resistant a little bit more. I'm like, but please, I'm going to die. I'm burning up. Oh my gosh.
You're not feeling this tension, do you? Like...
Right, exactly. But in the postpartum period, I don't really remember what happened sexually. I do know that we did start doing, because we were trying to, like, navigate bedtimes and trying to figure out all the things, we would do things that were a little bit, I guess, out of the box for us, but we ended up, like, starting to shower together more and, like, taking our regular schedule and seeing how we could work it in. It wasn't always like that, and we were never the kind that scheduled it, but I feel like now looking back retrospectively, like, that probably would have been good for us, you know?
Sometimes putting it on the calendar.
Right. I mean, it doesn't feel fun, and maybe it doesn't feel as spontaneous, but I think it could have been more helpful to make sure we were all getting all of the needs met. You know, we had a rhythm for everything else in our lives at that time, and, like, that could have been helpful, but yeah, we just made it work. Ish. Yeah.
I think, and I think most folks, the impression I get is, like, they're just learning to navigate. Like, what is coming across from your conversation here is, like, learning to navigate. And to your point too, I think also what folks can do is, like, when you schedule it, you have, like, that, it's on the schedule, and so, like, you're more mindful of it, you know? And then that speaks to also, like, the sensuality of pleasure. Like, showering together, that's another thing, like, that brings an intimacy and a vulnerability with somebody. And even if you're, like, literally, like, we only have this 15 minutes to take a shower, you are here with your partner, or maybe here, but, like, here with your partner in the shower, and you get that chance to, like, have a moment to bond. You're bonding with these babies, like, let me just come back to this partner who's of importance to me.
And I think you had said something earlier, like, you just wanted to be, like, touched. Like, you do get that touched out, but, like, sometimes you still want, like, you're touched out by the kids, but you're like, you know what, I could use, like, a good embrace, like, a good, like, not from baby,
a good makeout session, like, or a hug.
And so, like, those things in between the actual, like, sex, like, the foreplay, the eye contact, all of that really does, like, it really matters so much, and it ties into the sexual pleasure. It makes it so much more meaningful. So if you are now only had, like, man, we only had sex once a month, it's like, that's crazy, but, like, if you made moments to, like, connect with each other throughout the month, that, like, felt good, and, like, it's, like, almost building up to the, like, okay, I don't know when we're gonna find time to have this sex, but when we do, you know that I really want you. Like, that, and I think that is part of, like, where I'm navigating now. When you say, how did I reclaim it? I think, like, realizing that, right now, not forever.
Yeah.
Right now, as I have, so much going on in my life, if I'm saying sexual pleasure is important to me, if it's a part of my wellness, then I have to prioritize it, which may look different than like what it did before children,
That's right.
but it doesn't mean it's still not a priority. And so
Yeah.
like what I do, like whether that's scheduling it or like, but making sure that I make time for it. And that, like I said, to me has been like making sure that like, and he's better at it than I am. Like, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I was a big flirt back in my day. But like now, and I think, my mothering, I'm so always in tune with the kids that like, I forget to flirt with him sometimes. He reminds me, so like tapping on that, I'm not gonna curse. You can tap, I'm like, little tap on there, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And all of that, like all of that matters. And I'm like, oh, when he does that, I'm like, oh, little friskiness, I like it. But and I'm like trying to be more and more mindful of like he likes that too.
Yeah.
Like I know he loves it. He loves that. Not even likes that. He loves that.
Yeah.
He loves a little friskiness and all of that. So like building that into our sexual pleasure as well.
Nice.
These are the things like someone has said, you're not a slave to motherhood.
That's right.
And so I think the takeaway is like, you have these lives before you, these tiny people who are literally people developing, but like you have you.
Yeah.
And again, like the hierarchy of needs, like this is important too. And so having a partner who's in tune and can remind you like, hey, or when you remember and like aren't falling asleep or breastfeeding or chasing after a little one, like, the little nudge to say, hey, what's going on? I think that's vital to keeping up with the needs that need to be met. Again, I hope this sparks conversation for other people too. One of the things that like hit me too as we're talking, you brought up so many good points, both of you, like really, is the postpartum body. So like that's not on this list here, but like as we're talking about it, because you're like, oh yeah, like depression, anxiety, maybe, and then also like lacerations, tears. So how were you feeling about your body after you had your baby? Like, if you've cared to dive into that, like, how did you feel about yourself? Because that oftentimes can impact how we feel about being sexual. And you might have felt okay because I don't want to pass that judgment because you're like, I'm fine. Let me have this right now. No. But no, in all seriousness, because we put so much pressure on like the postpartum body and like this whole like concept of snack back, which is trash.
Yes.
Like it takes like a full year for us to kind of like even begin to be considered our new selves after a baby. And so like let's toss the pressure aside, but if you think back to that time, first baby, how did you feel about your body?
It's so interesting that you bring up like that snapback, which I'm a prenatal and postnatal fitness instructor. I do not believe in snapback. That's not how, like that's not the work that I do. That's not how it goes.
Yeah.
But I did lose weight really fast after my daughter. And you know what everyone said? Oh, look at you. You look good. Snap back, girl. You look. Yeah. And what was actually happening was I was undernourished, depressed, high stress, and anxiety. So I was getting all this praise from my postpartum body and snapping back. And actually, I was the smallest I've ever been, like since like high school. Like I was thin, like I was really underweight. Like for me, like for my body and what I'm used to, and like it was not. And so I felt very unattractive. Yeah. But I was getting all this praise because I lost my I lost it fast.
People don't know. They have no idea. Like, So we pass so much, like, just because you said that too, is like we pass so much judgment on folks because we think, oh, you're bigger, and you have no idea what people are going through, what their bodies are responding to, and and how it manifests physically. And everyone is different. So like, folks are here like saying, "Hey, awesome body," and you're like, "Thanks," but also the other things that are happening right now. So interesting you say that. Would you say there's like a word for how you felt in your body?
Not enough. Like honestly, like I just felt like I was not enough.
Oh,
like, it
okay.
felt like literally everything I was doing was not enough. And like in my body, I was like literally like, I'm literally like,
Yeah.
why are people saying I look good when I'm
Right,
literally like, you can't, like, I'm like skin and bones.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't look, like, you can't see that I'm like, and so like I didn't feel good enough. My body didn't feel good enough. What I was doing didn't feel good enough.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so that's where I
you
was.
were.
Yeah. And it was so odd to have people like
It's-
look at me.
It's
and-
odd anyway for people to like comment on our bodies, you know.
Yeah,
and
it
I
is.
mean, we all do it. So I know I'm in a space where I've said it. I think Joe's here recording, and I'm pretty sure. Sorry, I'm pretty sure I said it to his wife. I can clearly remember being in the house and saying like, "You look amazing," and she said thanks. And it's like I'm thinking back now as we're having this conversation, and I'm like, she could have been going through something that day, you know, because stuff happens, and like we're doing this internal processing. But for some reason, society thinks it's okay for us to be commenting on each other's bodies, and it's really like not. It's not our business. But anyways.
Yeah, no, I mean, and all the stories we make up because what we think we see and how we process or internalize or the lack that we see in ourselves, like that, that's huge.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
These recordings are in paid sponsorship with PeepShow Toys. PeepShow Toys is an immigrant-run small business focused on providing their community with body-safe toys made of non-toxic materials, inclusive and accessible to all.